on Spreaker Radio. Looks like it's 14 past 10 o'clock here, 14 minutes past the hour. Of course, the reason why I'm playing this song, Brett Antosh of the Spicy Sports Show with Sam and Brett from WWEC 88.3, the sound of Elizabethtown, is with me today from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We were just discussing over the break our love for Wawa, how much I miss it. I'm actually lucky enough to have hit a Turkey Hill today. Got some peach tea, got a little pizza, those little makeshift $2.99 pizzas, which is totally fine. They're absolutely disgusting now, I guess, now that I'm out of with Brett Antosh. So, Brett, let's talk about some basketball. NBA this season. There's a lot of storylines you can go with. I mean, Kobe's last season, which honestly, let's be ironically Kobe night, his last time playing in Philly.
Having some issues.
Oh, connection issues. Oh, hold on. All right, let me fix that. Boom. All right, so that being said, sorry. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of storylines you can really go with the NBA. I mean, again, the 76ers, they're a poorly run franchise. We know that. But again, it's trust the process with Sam Hinkie. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, Brett, you live in Philly. What are your thoughts on trust the process with Sam Hinkie?
So it's been basically going on for what, 4 years now?
Yep.
First year was clearly to try to get Andrew Wiggins. That failed. Second year was to get best player available, which I do believe that Jahlil Okafor at the time was the best player available. Karl-Anthony Towns was obviously pretty impressive, as was Anthony Russell, but God, what the hell is Porzingis?
Yep.
Doing pretty big things in New York right now. I'm not sure if anyone would have predicted that. But,
nope.
Honestly, it's tough to tell with Hinkie. In theory, the plan makes sense because when you do look at teams, the majority of teams who are successful have at least one superstar. At the same time, though, you need to have a supporting cast. And he's had a lot of picks right now, but only two of them who are currently on the roster are really anything to kind of get excited about as NBA players. There's obviously Nerlens Noel and Jahlil Okafor. I could look at the rest of this roster and tell you half those guys in 2 years probably won't be in the NBA. Half those guys next year might not be in the NBA. So it's very interesting. It's kind of, for lack of a better term, tanking and not really caring what happens. But at the same time, you do kind of need to start developing guys to obviously become NBA players, whether they're bench players, whether they're starters, which is probably very likely as second-round picks aren't as likely to become NBA starters. It doesn't really matter what they are. You just need to start getting picks and actually turning them into something that can help you in some capacity now and in the long run.
It's true. Looking at
I guess this year it's try to get Simmons. I don't know if that's going to actually work or not, but we'll see.
Look, if they get Simmons, I mean, I've been watching a couple games with him in LSU. That dude is a stud. I don't care what people say that he can't shoot. That dude's a baller. He can go out for 40. He can rebound. He can distribute. At 6'10", he is so mobile. It's ridiculous. He's like Karl-Anthony Towns, but a little bit better than that. If I'm gonna be honest with you, I think maybe his rebounding needs to get a little bit better. He needs to be a little more consistent with his outside shot. But I mean, he's just a playmaker and can absolutely ball. What's funny now that I'm looking at the standings between the East and the West, go ahead. Go ahead.
One thing to consider, all the things you mentioned about Ben Simmons that he needs to work on, right? Those are things that he can be taught. Those are things he can practice. The athleticism, the size, those are things that can't be taught by any coach. Those are just natural God-given gifts. So, yeah, it's not necessarily a bad thing that he needs to work on his shot or he needs to work on his rebounding because you can work on that, right?
Yeah.
You can't take a guy who's 6'1" and make him 6'6", 6'5", etc. If he's 6'1", he's 6'1". You can't make a guy who's 6'6" and fast or slow. You can't turn him into a fast guy overnight.
Yeah.
You can't obviously make him a good shooter overnight either, but it's a little bit easier to make him a good shooter than it is to make him a big guy who's fast and can do all these different things. So they're a very rare breed, and that's why they're obviously very highly touted when they are available.
It's funny. I think that scouts sometimes have become a little lazy, and when you do the draft boards, one thing I've always noticed is needs to get bigger. Yeah, he's 18, he's 6'6", maybe 190 pounds. No kidding, he needs to get bigger. That's the most obvious thing ever. I think people that put that are just ridiculous, if you ask me.
Oh no, I do agree. It's like the same thing in every sport. You know, I see in the NHL draft every year. It's like, oh, this guy is 18 years old, he's 6'1" and like 140 pounds, he needs to add some weight. It's like, well, yes, he's only 140 pounds, like he might get broken in half. Even at the NBA level, you know, if the guy's like 6'10" and only like 160, well, yeah, he's gonna need to get bigger, but he's only 18 years old. You have to keep that in mind. As his body matures, he's going to gain more weight. As he spends more time in the weight room, he's going to get bigger. It's not, you know, yeah, I don't
exactly.
I never got that either, but
no.
Yeah, it is what it is.
One of the things to look at, this is my first time looking at the standings all season, NBA, just because, again, it's a slow season. I'm going to 82 games. It's funny now that the Eastern Conference, again, to this point, which is about, between 9 and 14 games, you know, about 21, 25 games, whatever you're looking at. The Eastern Conference has 10 teams with a winning record thus far, while the 7th seed right now in the West is the Houston Rockets at a measly 11 and 12. Utah Jazz as the 8th seed, 9 and 10. Do you think this is a trend that the Eastern Conference has gotten at least a little deeper in terms of overall better teams, or is it just an anomaly for the first 20 odd games of the season?
I think it's a little bit of both. Common logic says, you know, after so many years of the West having so many dominant teams, right, those Eastern Conference teams are bound to start getting better draft picks. Better draft picks obviously lead to better players. Better players lead to better teams. At the same time, you know, most of the teams only play, like, as you said, 21 to 25 games. So I think it's a little bit of a small sample size to really make that distinction. But I think there's gravity to both sides, right? You can just say, oh, you know, they're just playing better now because, you know, for whatever reason, you know, maybe they've played more East-West games. I don't know. Maybe they just have more talent across the board. It's a little mixture of everything, in my opinion. But yeah, I am inclined to believe, and like I said, it is a little bit early, so I can't prove this, but, you know, things go in cycles. So now that the West was good for the past, I don't know, like 5-6 years, right? Now the East is going to be getting the guys who are a little bit better, and they'll be getting better as a result of that.
Now,
and as, you know, they get better, the other teams start to get a little bit older, decline, yada yada yada. You know,
yeah,
typical sports stuff.
Of the players drafted, and again, I don't know if you need the time to pull up the draft board, who's been the most impressive player for you thus far out of the rookies this season?
Obviously, I'm a little bit biased because I hear the most about him, but Jahlil Okafor he hasn't worked out a place as a scorer in the NBA, that's for sure. It's not very, very rare that an 18, 19-year-old comes in and scores like he does, but some of the things that he's able to do getting into the paint and then getting to the rim, it's quite impressive for a player as young as he is to be able to do that. His footwork is absolutely phenomenal for a big guy, and you don't really see that out of big guys very often. You know, you see a lot of guys who, you know, the ones who are really good are the ones with the good feet, but you see a lot of guys who are just kind of like okay feet. You know, they have a few moves here and there. He seems to have a nose for the net, and that's not necessarily something you can teach. As I also mentioned earlier, Porzingis has looked pretty impressive thus far, doing some very, very big things up in New York. So that's a good thing. I mean, for the Knicks, obviously, and for basketball in general. But yeah, I'd say those two are probably the two that have stood out the most to me in the very limited capacity that I've watched NBA basketball. But I don't know. Those are the two that I seem to hear a lot about.
Yeah, I mean, for me, again, just watching the players, Mudiay has been absolutely fantastic for a Denver team that, again, early on in the season has been somewhat productive. I think that, again, they're gonna need some years to rebuild, but I think you can build around a player like Mudiay, very explosive point guard. I think 6'5", 190 pounds. He can definitely distribute. He's absolutely fantastic on and off the ball. So for me, at least the Denver Nuggets, that's a good pick. Again, Utah Jazz finally developing some talent here and there. I think they had their Lyles was their pick from Kentucky. So again, I think the Utah Jazz and the Denver Nuggets are going to be two teams to look forward to moving forward. Now, let's talk about Golden State. That's always the team to talk about. If it wasn't for that, we'd probably be talking about how impressive the San Antonio Spurs are, 18-5 thus far. But Golden State's 23-0, 23 in a row. I think they have about 4 games to catch the Miami Heat for second all-time at 27. I'm going to pull up their schedule right now. Who is the first team, do you think, that has a chance to beat them? You have at Boston on Friday. You have at Milwaukee, Phoenix, Milwaukee again, Utah, Cleveland, Sacramento, Dallas, and Houston to close out the month.
So, I think this is just what I think. I think that Christmas Day game is going to be tough for them in Cleveland. That's a game I think that they could potentially lose. And if I were to guess out of, the next 5 games or so, the one they would lose, I would believe that would be the one that they would lose. The next one that is kind of intriguing from my perspective as games that they could potentially lose are the back-to-back days in Texas, right? You're playing the Dallas Mavericks one day and then the Rockets the next day. Yeah, you mentioned the Rockets aren't that good of a team, but those are two, at least the Mavericks are a pretty good team, and the Rockets, they're not a pushover either. The record isn't so great, but they still do have some talent on that team. So I kind of wonder if in a back-to-back scenario, if the Warriors will actually be able to win both of those games. It's going to be kind of tough in my opinion. Back-to-backs are always tough for teams regardless of sport. And when you're trying to preserve a winning streak like this, I think it's something that could negatively impact your ability to continue on that streak.
Yeah. Yeah, regardless of what you think, I know a lot of comparisons have been made. Yeah, the Bulls 72-10, they're not going to be as good as a different league. For me, at the end of the day, what I would do is just respect what they've done thus far. 23-0, no matter where you are, is still, no matter what you do, is still impressive. The way they've been doing it with offense, their defense hasn't been as efficient, and they're still 7th in the league in defensive efficiency. That's still pretty impressive for a team that just won a title. And for most people, when you win a title, yeah, you're going to back down a bit, but they've clearly developed a great bench. Luke Walton's probably going to get more respect. I think that he does deserve it just because, again, people think, yeah, it's a system that they just shoot. But in late game situations where, most recently at Utah, yeah, you have to make those substitutions, who's going to play, who's going to not play the last couple of minutes, and that's up to the coach to decide those plays. So, I think that although Luke Walton is not getting any credit for these wins because he's an interim coach subbing in for Kerr, I think that I would still respect him. And again, who knows? Maybe next year he could be one of the big premier coaches for a job down the road. Now, moving to Philadelphia.
Absolutely.
Now, moving to Philly, obviously your neck of the woods. 1-21 thus far. Obviously, we're not expecting them to make a miraculous run to the playoffs this season, and maybe not next season. But they did bring in Jerry Colangelo, head of USA Basketball, over to the 76ers just because, again, the 76ers are a franchise that hasn't done as well as they should have. What do you think of the move for Colangelo to go to Philadelphia?
So I think there's a couple of theories out there as to why this happened. There's conspiracy theories that the NBA owners obviously aren't very happy with what the Philadelphia 76ers are doing, and I can totally understand where that's coming from. This is like the 3rd straight year, as I mentioned earlier, where the roster is just really, really bad. I think Hinkie, his idea in theory is good. It's just a matter of there's a few flaws to it with how it's working right now. You obviously see the problems that Jahlil Okafor is having off the court, right? So one of the things that could kind of mitigate those problems is if you have maybe a savvy veteran who is a leader and kind of teach these guys, kind of like what you're seeing in Minnesota right now. You have a guy in Kevin Garnett who can be a mentor to Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins. He might not have a lot left in the tank, but he at least knows how to be successful in this league, and I think that's something that the Sixers are severely lacking. With Colangelo, I think the big asset for him, or his biggest improvement, is going to be the ability to attract free agents to Philadelphia. He's a very well-respected man in terms of basketball, does a lot with USA Basketball, knows a ton of people, so I think he's going to be able to connect with players a little bit better than Sam Hinkie would. I think Sam Hinkie's kind of annoyed a lot of people with what he's done so far, but Colangelo is so well-respected that they'll be willing to look past what Hinkie has done and say, you know what, Jerry is helping out with this team. He's, like, I think senior vice president of basketball operations or some title, which basically says he's got, like, final say. So if Jerry's coming for you, right, it's going to be something that they want to win. They want to start, helping these kids become better players, and these